Greetings, this is Christine Bundy on Indiana, Gibson County, and I want to remind you that also anytime you're asked which county on Indiana that you live on, there are 92 counties on Indiana. Indiana is not one of the 92 counties. So it is July the 5th, 2023, GenEd Wednesday. How was everyone's Separation Day? Or did you continue to declare independence to the state? I look forward to seeing any paperwork to be published to present to the Assembly for those that use the 4th of July as their day to declare their separation from the state. And I hope you enjoyed your time with your families. And let's go ahead and take a moment of silence before we get started with our reading for today. Okay, we are reading pages 29 to 36 of Brent Allan Winters' book on Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, a common lawyer's comments, clause by clause. All right, let's go ahead and get that reading going. Brent Allan Winters, Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, a common lawyer, comments, clause by clause. Clause 10. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. Comment. The tyrant also, known by his doings, see this handbook, U.S. Declaration of 76, Clause 30 in comment, forever tries to replace common law's adversarial spoken, oral, and public jury trials with civil law's inquisitional secret tribunals, using admiralty, martial, and canon law. Local court authority must arise direct from the jury, ensuring trial by jury, not by government. The soul of the common law is its courts. The heart of its courts are the jury. As long as the heart throbs, the soul quickens. As long as juries decide cases, freedom is alive. Government cannot be total. Here our declaration charges the king with violating common law's separation of powers requirement. By stopping the establishment of judiciary powers, he meant to displace the power of the common law courts to interpret the law with his will. More to the point, by disallowing courts, he does away with the jury, thereby putting all litigants at his mercy in admiralty tribunals and not that of their neighbors or peers. Again, the British powers that be, by declaring the common law, has no authority in the colonies. Replaced the jury with civil law's admiralty courts. The several revenue acts said the First Continental Congress, which extend the powers of the admiralty courts beyond their ancient limits, deprive the American of trial by jury. The king and his cronies' goal was to keep their monopolies of power over trade, East India Company, and banking, England's central bank, be fed with tax revenues collected using British bayonets and Hessian swords. And Hessians are the Germans. But to do so required bringing the colonists under control of admiralty law, which uses no jury. Never forget, says Devlin, without trial by jury, all are under the merciless power of the state. Tyrants seek to overwhelm or diminish trial by jury, for no tyrant could afford to leave a subject's freedom in the hands of 12 of his countrymen. so that trial by jury is more than an instrument of justice and more than one wheel of the Constitution. It is the lamp that shows that freedom lives. Clause 11. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. Comment. In civil law countries, most all of the world, a judge is a member of the civil service ranks, dependent upon the state for the employment and pay. He is a rubber stamp, substituting the state's will for law. In short, he's a kept man. In fact, he's not a judge but an enforcer of state codes. Though a government lackey, his judgecraft keeps up appearances of government fairness. Here, our declaration again charges King George with violating common law's separation of powers requirement by substituting his will for that of the judges. Where King George was unable to do away with the courts altogether, he made judges dependent on him alone for their jobs and pay. Magna Carta, however, requires judges to follow the law of the land, not the mere will of the government. We, the Crown, will not make, i.e., appoint justices, constables, sheriffs, or bailiffs who do not know the law of the land and mean to observe it well. Judges, said Sam Adams, ought never be dependent on any man or body of men. Judges are to follow due process, not the government's will. Even so-called exceptions must vindicate due process, never to change it. Our national motto is, in God we trust. The trust God is to rely upon his unchanging laws, i.e. the laws of nature's God in Clause 1. In fact, any trying to break the laws of nature's God will instead break himself on them. Thus, said the old continental soldier, was the arm of British power in America dislocated. Clause 12. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Comment. Civil law-minded government imposes between you and the jury layers of bureaucrats with their administrative law. As a tangled matting of brambles, these not only keep you from trial by jury, but also from a fair and impartial hearing before a neutral judge. Administrative courts, being of the civil law, use no jury, and their judges are kept men, dependents, holding their jobs and pay at the pleasure of the governor or president. Carl Llewellyn, after decades of consideration, noted three things of administrative law. First, it is a late arrival in our common law country. Second, it is a detour from the trail through which parties must struggle in their quest for justice. Third, this detour from justice's trail leads into the wilds of government and politics and queer events in both. The common law tradition is intolerant of professional bureaucrats, law enforcement agents, and prosecutors, which are all part and parcel of the civil law tradition, the enemy and antagonist of common law. In fact, professional prosecutors and armed police were never part of the British American colonist world. See this handbook, U.S. Constitution Amendment 2, and comment. In England, professional prosecutors are still scarce. Until recent times, London's bobbies remained unarmed. In New England, armed police were uncommon until at least 1825. Simply put, the colonials' common law way of life distrusted government police with guns, requiring instead that the people arm themselves. Administrative law, a form of civil law, had spread from Babylon to ancient cities, reaching from the Vatican during the 11th century. It infected all Europe, spawning bureaucrats and administrative codes. Appearing under many labels, it reached a zenith in revolutionary France, putting the will of rulers for true law. It keeps the one wronged from his day before the jury. Clause 13. He is kept among us in times of peace, standing armies, without the consent of our legislatures. Comment. Where armies occupy, martial law commands, displacing common law. The common law tradition is intolerant of standing armies because such an army tempts office holders to use it to spread martial law. The fundamental form of civil law, says Sam Adams, purely imperial, it commands obedience or punishment. A standing military force with an overgrown executive, president, will not long be safe companions to liberty. The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. James Madison. By contrast, our common law depends for the common defense upon the militia, the people. Whether summoned for impaneling on the grand or petit jury, or for mustering armed, ever ready to fall in ranks and fight. In both cases, the one summoned is to come equipped to do his constitutional duty. For jury duty, armed with the knowledge of his power over the facts and the verdict. For militia duty, armed as the Second Amendment requires, yet, unlike standing armies and lifetime judges, posing no threat to freedom. In addition, the professional soldier of the standing army tends more to fight for career and pay, and therefore to obey for pay, whereas the militiaman's passion for the fight focuses on hearth and home. Unlike the professional soldier, he is not career-minded, and therefore less likely to obey an unlawful order. Bottom line, standing armies, as also career judges, prosecutors, and policemen, whether in peace or war, become impatient, result-minded administrators, often unwilling to protect personal rights. As the common law and scripture trust the jury over a government employee judge, the loyal American trusts the militia over a standing army. Clause 4. He is affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. Comment. King and Parliament were trying to avoid common law's time-consuming procedures, called due process, or the course of the common law with martial law commands. As all forms of civil law, martial law demands instant obedience in attempt to command the future. Common law, on the other hand, searches the past to understand the future, seeking truth in light of past acts done. In short, civil law speculates what is right and commands it. Common law judges in hindsight. Hence, martial law, though needful in battle and preparations for war, must remain, as all civil law, subject to common law's due process. Our Constitution puts its armed forces under command of a non-military commander-in-chief, the President, and requires him to act only at the advice and consent of the Senate. Likewise, the ancient common law required the commander-in-chief of the militia, Fridfair, to serve at the advice and consent of the elders, called the Witan. After Magna Carta, kings sought the advice and consent of the barons and later yet of Parliament. Because King George turned his British army and Hessians loose to disband the colonies' militia and humble them, our Constitution now subjects soldiers to our common law courts in non-military matters, and allows the President to wage war only after Congress has declared war and provided money, which is never to be for more than 2 years at a time, preventing open-ended military excursions lasting longer. Clause 15. He is combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws. giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Comment. The Constitution, this, Clause 15, references is England's common law. By displacing the common law with a law foreign to the colonists' English Constitution, King George and his cronies did away with common law freedoms. Paragraph 15 also accuses George III of conspiracy, an agreement to commit a crime proven by action aimed to completing that crime. Accordingly, our declaration here shifts from the lone pronoun he, King George, to he has combined with others, co-conspirators, fellow dependents on the central bank's trading and offshoot monopolies. The culprits of Clause 15 to 24 are these conspirators. Clause 24, calling this cartel them, declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate. In fact, every abuse Clause 15 to 24 cites is one of the goals of George's having combined with others by giving his assent to their pretended legislation. As does the Federal Reserve Bank in our day, England's central bank enjoyed monopolies on issuing currency, trade using the East India Company, and receipt of tax revenues to service its loans, and further to fund enforcement of such taxation, all contrary to the English Constitution's common law rights against such monopolies. This clause shows that not only did the colonists have a good constitution in their common law government, but also their zeal was keen to keep it pure from strange law pollutants. A jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, Admiralty law. The colonial Americans' British brethren had the same zeal for the common law. For instance, on 14 November 1770, the London Evening Post included the following against an English judge. In contempt of the common law of England, you introduce into the court jurisprudence unknown to Englishmen. The Roman Code, the law of nations, and the opinions of foreign civilians are your perpetual theme, but who ever heard you mention Magna Carta or the Bill of Rights with respect? By such treacherous arts, the noble simplicity and spirit of our Saxon laws were first corrupted. Our war for secession from Britain's empire was to enjoy our English Constitution, the same common law tradition the English demanded for themselves. In a word, our declaration says King George had conspired with the bank and trade monopolies to displace common law authority with civil law's admiralty power. Today, much as then, the general government, by overreaching the Admiralty Clause, uses Admiralty law to control people and their property. Fundamental common law rights do not attach to matters within Admiralty jurisdiction. Thus, government's unlawful use of Admiralty law works to deny common law rights, such as the right to trial by jury, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, and the right to keep and bear arms. Admiralty law, a form of civil law, is good when kept to its proper use to govern shipping ships and those activities in direct relationship to these, but is downright dangerous when used ashore. See this handbook, U.S. Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1, and comment discussing government's abuse of the Admiralty Clause. Legislation in the common law sense differs from the civil law sense. Common law legislation is by direct consent of the governed through their representatives and by direct consent of the jury, instance by instance. Civil law legislation is the enforced command of the state. Further, common law demands that legislation be constitutional, i.e., within common law principles, barring powerful men's legislating by decree through a president and an administrative admiralty law, bureaucrats' acts of pretended legislation. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go. Oh, it's not letting me just pull that up. Alright, hold on just a moment. We will get that in a better format. I was hoping to be able to show it. It shows it correctly on Brave, but we'll go ahead. Alright, now we can display so that we can go through the screens. Okay, so I've got here, this is the link to the audio that we just listened to, pages 29 to 36. And again, here is the link for Brent Allan Winters' website, and this is directly for this Declaration of 76, United States Constitution that we're going through. Alright, so I will bring this so that we can be able to see it separately here, and go through this, and so we can run through the presentation information here. Alright, so that should, yes, okay, beautiful. Alright, we'll get these back up, and we'll get this back to, page 29. Yes, that's where we started for this reading. Okay, so we have the following 4 questions that are relative solely to Clause 10. I've broken these up by clause this time. So the first question, he has blank, the administration of blank, by refusing his assent to laws establishing judiciary powers. The tyrant, always known by his doings, forever tries to replace common laws blank, oral and public jury trials and civil laws blank, secret tribunals using admiralty, maritime and canon law, or martial and canon law. Here, our declaration charges the king with blank, common laws blanket powers requirement. 62, never forget, says Devlin, without blank by jury, all are under the blank of the state, power of the state. Okay, so he has obstructed the administration of justice for question 59. The tyrant, always known by his doings, forever tries to replace common law's adversarial, spoken, oral, and public jury trials with civil laws, inquisitional secret tribunals. Inquisitional secret tribunals. Alright. For 61, here our declaration charges the king with violating common law's separation of powers requirement. Never forget, says Devlin, and without trial. Let's see, where was his comment? Here we go. Never forget, says Devlin, without trial by jury, all are under the merciless power of the state. All right. Clause 11. There are 5 questions for Clause 11. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. 64. In civil law countries, most all of the world, a judge is a member of civil service ranks, dependent upon the state. Right? Dependent upon the state. Let's see, where is that one on this? Let's see, is it? Okay, so dependent on the state for employment and pay. Okay. 65, Magna Carta, however, requires judges to follow the law of the land, not the mere will of the government. Judges the judges are to follow due process, not the government's will. Our national motto is "In God we trust," not the government, right? It's in God we trust. That was the whole point of this, was to separate from the state, so to get closer and to preserve divine providence. Clause 12. These are the questions for Clause 12. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Civil law-minded government imposes between you and the jury layers of bureaucrats with their administrative law. The common law tradition is tolerant of professional bureaucrats, law enforcement agents, and prosecutors, which are all part and parcel of the civil law tradition, the enemy and antagonist of common law. All right, 71. Let's see. Administrative law, a form of civil law, had spread from Babylon. See, it never finished, from Babylon to ancient cities, reaching from the Vatican during the 11th century. It infected all of Europe, spawning bureaucrats and administrative codes. Clause 13, these are the three questions. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures, where armies occupy, martial law commands, which then is displacing common law. By contrast, okay, let's see, that is at, okay, this question is answered in, so it must be in the box. Here we go. By contrast, our common law depends for the common defense upon the militia. The militia, the people, that's us. That's you having to actually do something. Whether summoned for impaneling on the grand or petit jury, or for mustering armed, ever ready to fall in ranks and fight. Clause 14. These are the questions. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. King and Parliament were trying to avoid common law's time-consuming procedures, all due process, or the course of the common law with martial law commands. 77. In short, civil law speculates what is right and commands it. Common law judges in hindsight. Our Constitution puts its armed forces under command of a non-military commander-in-chief, the president, and requires him to act only at the advice and consent of the Senate. Supposed to follow through by Senate And then there's executive orders to go with that because of the advice and consent of the Senate. After Magna Carta, kings sought the advice and consent of the barons and later yet of Parliament. So they went right back to it. All right. And see, that's the thing. If you've got to, you yourself have to be the one that's willing to be consistent and hold to it. Right? If you just fall right back into running right back to those that were already doing it, how have you changed? How has anything been changed? Clause 15. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of they're pretending legislation, right? The pretended legislation of they put together the affirmative action. So, of course, now affirmative action, the U.S. Supreme Court has finally decided to overturn that, given that it doesn't need to be added, right? The Constitution, this Clause 15 references, is England's common law by displacing the common law with a law foreign to the colonists' English Constitution. Let's see, as does number 82, as does the Federal Reserve Bank, in the box, as does the Federal Reserve Bank in our day. England's central bank enjoyed monopolies on issuing currency trade using the East India Company, and receipt of tax revenues. Number 83. Let's see, the colonial Americans, British brethren, had the same zeal for the common law. All right. Number 84. In a word, so let's find that one. In a word, let's see. In a word, our declaration says King George. Let's see. Where is that one? So that I can, it says King George had conspired with the bank and trade monopolies to displace common law authority and civil law's admiralty power. To displace common law authority with civil law's admiralty power. Thus, government's unlawful use of admiralty law works to deny common law rights, such as the right to trial by jury, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, and the right to keep and bear what? Arms. Common law legislation is by indirect consent of the governed through their representatives and by direct consent of the jury. Instant by instant, civil law legislation is the enforced command of the state. All right, so that is all of the questions for those pages that we went through, pages 29 to 36 of Brent Allan Winters. Declaration of 76. All right, so here are the social media links as to where we're at right now. If you know of others, please email records@theindianaassembly.org if they offer live stream chat functions and that kind of thing. I will later upload the link to today's presentation so that it is already uploaded to the high drive, and I will put the link in the various places so you can be able to go to that. If you're interested in supporting the assembly because you've watched the show today and you're also subscribing and sharing, you're able to go to this link to be able to share your gift. Otherwise, if you did want to do a regular one-time monthly gift or a regular monthly gift, you can be able to go here to set that up. One time, again, whatever amount, or if you wanted to do monthly. And here is if you wanted to schedule a free consult. Please remember that I will be asking questions just as much as you're asking questions. It's a two-way street. Share the information. Don't come being vague and dishonest, thinking and assuming that I'm just going to answer every single question for you. We're honorable with each other. All right, and here is my contact info. So let's stop that. I guess I'll leave that on there for now. All right, so we'll go ahead and end the call for today, and don't forget, if you haven't yet, you need to you need to click the button within the email, "He's coming, are you?" If you receive that email about our postal chief, Area 4 postal chief coming here, or coming to our calls to be able to start supporting the Indiana Assembly directly in building the assembly as a whole. As well as also supporting our building of the militia aspect as well. So therefore the General Assembly calls are now moved to Mondays, every other Monday. That will be with this call with Joe. Make sure, again, if you receive that email, you'll need to go into that email, actually click on it, and let us know that you do want the call details, because you will not receive it unless you've requested the call link details, because this is for those that have actually presented honorably, and those that are actually ready and willing to actually start doing the build of the assembly. Again, it is not for a remedy call in any way. It is only for general questions relative to building the assembly. Okay? So please don't think you're coming on thinking you're going to be able to hijack to be able to get some personal remedies answered. That's not the purpose of the call. It is about the building of the General Assembly and the militia. Stay on point with it. All right, I want to thank you all, and I will see you on the next call. Peace and love.